Bilionario was taking his fiancée home, until he saw his ex crossing the crosswalk with twins. Welcome to Secrets Narrated. Before we begin, drop a comment telling us which city you're watching from. We love seeing how far our stories travel. When the story ends, don't forget to rate it from 0 to 10 and share what you felt along the way. And if you enjoy emotional stories filled with twists and hidden truths, make sure to follow Secrets Narrated so you don't miss the next one. Now, sit back, relax, and enjoy every detail. Adrian Cole adjusted his platinum Rolex as he guided his midnight black Aston Martin through the winding streets of downtown Seattle. The late afternoon sun cast golden streaks across the leather interior, illuminating the woman beside him. Cassandra Wells, 28, blonde hair perfectly styled in loose waves, designer sunglasses perched elegantly on her nose. She was everything he thought he wanted now. Beautiful, independent, uncomplicated. The restaurant has a 2-month waiting list, Cassandra said, checking her reflection in the visor mirror. I still can't believe you got us a table for tonight. Adrian smiled, his steel gray eyes focused on the road ahead. At 40, he had learned that money could buy almost anything, including spontaneity. His dark hair, touched with silver at the temples, caught the light as he turned toward her. Perks of owning renewable energy contracts with half the city. Cassandra laughed, the sound light and carefree. You make it sound so simple. Simple. That's exactly what Adrian had wanted his life to become. After years of complicated relationships, demanding schedules, and emotional expectations he couldn't meet, simplicity felt like luxury. His relationship with Cassandra was 3 months old, long enough to enjoy her company, short enough to avoid serious conversations about the future. The traffic light ahead turned red, and Adrian brought the car to a smooth stop. His phone buzzed with work notifications, but he ignored them. Friday evenings were sacred now, reserved for dinner dates, art galleries, and conversations that never ventured into territory he wasn't willing to explore. I love how relaxed you are these days, Cassandra said, reaching over to touch his hand. When we first met, you seemed so intense. Adrian's grip tightened slightly on the steering wheel. Intense. That's what his previous relationship had taught him about himself, that he was too focused on work, too unavailable, too resistant to the kind of domestic life that others craved. The breakup had been painful but necessary, a clean cut that allowed both parties to find what they actually wanted. I've learned to appreciate the moment, he said, meaning it. No more pressure about weekend plans that stretched months ahead. No more discussions about holiday traditions he had no interest in creating. No more hints about engagement rings or family dinners that made him feel trapped. The crosswalk ahead filled with evening pedestrians, office workers heading home, couples hand in hand, teenagers laughing as they navigated the busy intersection. Adrian watched them absently, his mind already shifting to the wine list at the restaurant, when something made him focus. A woman was crossing the street, moving carefully through the crowd. She carried something against her chest. No, 2 somethings. Babies. Twins, from the look of it, bundled in soft blue and pink blankets. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and she moved with the cautious precision of someone carrying precious cargo. Adrian's breath caught. Even from a distance, even with her head down, he knew that profile. The gentle curve of her neck, the way she held her shoulders, the careful, deliberate way she walked. Lena Hart, his ex-fiancée, the woman he had left exactly 1 year and 1 month ago. Lena paused in the middle of the crosswalk as one of the babies began to fuss. She shifted them both to one arm and gently stroked the crying infant's face with her free hand. Her lips moved. She was singing, Adrian realized, or humming something soothing. The baby quieted almost immediately and she continued across the street. Adrian? Cassandra's voice seemed to come from far away. The light's green. He blinked, realizing he had been staring. Cars behind him were waiting. Lena had disappeared into the crowd on the other side of the street, but the image burned in his mind. Babies. Twin babies who looked to be about 4 months old. Adrian's hands trembled as he pressed the accelerator. 1 year and 1 month ago when they broke up, Lena hadn't mentioned being pregnant, but the timing would be exactly right. You look like you've seen a ghost, Cassandra said, studying his face with concern. Do you know that woman? Adrian kept his eyes on the road, his mind racing. Had Lena been pregnant when they separated? Had she known and chosen not to tell him? Or Or had she discovered it afterward and made the decision to handle it alone? The questions multiplied, each one more unsettling than the last. But underneath them all was a single devastating realization. The woman he had thought he knew completely had become a mother. She was raising 2 children, possibly his children, without him, and she had looked content, peaceful, like someone who had found exactly what she was meant to be doing. "Adrian? Sorry," he managed, forcing a smile. "Just thinking about work." But he wasn't thinking about work. He was thinking about the conversation they'd had the night before their breakup, when Lena had mentioned wanting to start a family someday. He had been honest, brutally honest, about his lack of interest in children. He had told her he couldn't give her the domestic life she wanted, that he needed freedom to focus on building his empire. She had listened quietly, nodded, and the next morning she had agreed that they weren't compatible long-term. It had been the most mature breakup of his life. No screaming, no accusations, no attempts to change each other's minds. Just 2 people acknowledging that they wanted different things, and having the courage to walk away. But now seeing her with those babies, Adrian wondered if mature had actually meant devastatingly lonely. He pulled into the restaurant's valet parking, his hands still unsteady. Cassandra was already checking her lipstick, excited about their evening ahead. She represented everything he thought he had chosen. Beauty without complications, companionship without expectations, pleasure without responsibility. So why did his chest feel hollow? Why did the image of Lena humming to those babies make his carefully constructed simple life feel suddenly, terrifyingly empty? As he handed his keys to the valet, one question echoed in his mind. What if the life he had been so determined to avoid was the only one worth living? What would you have done in Adrian's position? Told Lena immediately about seeing her, or tried to forget and move forward with your new life? Lena Hart shifted baby Oliver to her left arm as she unlocked the door to her modest 2-bedroom apartment in Capitol Hill. The late afternoon light filtered through the sheer curtains, casting soft shadows across the hardwood floors she had refinished herself during her pregnancy. Baby Emma stirred against her chest, making the soft mewing sounds that meant she would need feeding soon. The apartment was nothing like the penthouse she had shared with Adrian. No floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Elliott Bay. No marble countertops, no smart home technology that responded to voice commands. But it was hers. Every piece of furniture chosen carefully, every corner arranged with purpose. The pale yellow walls reflected her belief that children should grow up surrounded by warmth, not cold luxury. She settled both babies into their shared bassinet, a decision born of necessity rather than choice. Oliver immediately reached for his sister's hand, their tiny fingers intertwining in the way that never failed to make Lena's heart ache with fierce protectiveness. 4 months. 4 months of sleepless nights, of learning to change 2 diapers simultaneously, of singing lullabies at 3 in the morning while bouncing babies who seemed to take turns refusing sleep. 4 months of a love so intense it sometimes left her breathless. 4 months of not once regretting her decision to keep Adrian's paternity a secret. Lena moved to the kitchen, a compact space where she had learned to prepare formula bottles with mechanical precision. The refrigerator was covered with appointment cards, pediatrician visits, vaccination schedules, mommy and me classes she couldn't afford but attended anyway, because Emma and Oliver deserved every opportunity. Her phone buzzed with a text from her sister Claire. "Coffee tomorrow? I can bring bagels." Lena smiled as she typed back, "If you don't mind baby chaos. They're going through a crying phase." Claire's response was immediate. "Babies cry, sisters listen. See you at 10. This was Lena's support system now. Her younger sister, her neighbor Mrs. Rodriguez, who sometimes watched the babies when Lena had job interviews, and Dr. Sarah Kim, the pediatrician who had become something close to a friend. A small circle but solid. People who showed up without being asked, who understood that love sometimes meant accepting help gracefully. She tested the formula temperature against her wrist, remembering how Adrian used to tease her about being overly cautious. "You check restaurant reviews like you're planning military strategy," he had said once, laughing as she researched their anniversary dinner location for weeks in advance. He hadn't understood that careful planning wasn't anxiety. It was love. It was caring enough about outcomes to put in the work beforehand. Emma's cry pierced the quiet, followed immediately by Oliver's sympathetic wails. Lena moved with practiced efficiency, scooping them both up and settling into the rocking chair that had been her grandmother's. The chair creaked softly as she began to feed Emma, while Oliver nestled against her shoulder, his cries subsiding into contented snuffles. This was the moment she had feared most during pregnancy. The overwhelming responsibility of caring for two lives entirely dependent on her. But instead of drowning, she had discovered a strength she hadn't known she possessed. Every sleepless night, every doctor's appointment managed alone, every milestone celebrated with no one but her babies as witness. Each experience had built something unshakable inside her. Her phone rang. For a wild moment her heart stuttered, imagining it might be Adrian. But the caller ID showed her boss from the marketing firm where she worked part-time remotely. "Lena, I know it's after hours, but the Johnson account just came back with revision requests. Any chance you could handle them this weekend?" Lena looked at the babies in her arms, at the laundry basket overflowing in the corner, at the stack of bills on her kitchen counter that she would tackle after the babies were asleep. "Of course," she said. "Send them over. You're amazing. I don't know how you manage it all." Neither do I sometimes, Lena thought. But what she said was, "You do what you have to do." After hanging up, she continued rocking, watching the way the light changed across her babies' faces. Oliver had Adrian's straight nose and strong jawline, already visible even at 4 months. Emma had inherited Lena's green eyes and stubborn chin. They were beautiful, healthy, and completely unaware that their father was one of the wealthiest men in the Pacific Northwest. Lena had Googled Adrian exactly once since their breakup. The search results showed him at charity galas, renewable energy conferences, and society events, always impeccably dressed, usually with an attractive woman on his arm. He looked successful, confident, and entirely unencumbered by the kind of domestic responsibilities that defined Lena's days. She had closed the laptop and never searched again. The decision to keep the pregnancy secret hadn't been made lightly. For weeks after discovering she was carrying twins, Lena had crafted and deleted dozens of text messages to Adrian. She had driven to his office building 3 times, sitting in the parking lot while she rehearsed conversations that always ended the same way, with him offering financial support but not emotional investment, or worse, suggesting solutions that didn't align with what she wanted for her children. Adrian had been honest about not wanting children. He had never pretended otherwise, never given her false hope. The breakup had been initiated by him, but it had been mutual in the end because they both recognized the fundamental incompatibility. So why would a pregnancy change that? Lena had chosen to believe that forcing someone to be a father was no gift to anyone, especially not to the children involved. Emma and Oliver deserve parents who chose them wholeheartedly, not someone fulfilling an obligation. As if sensing her thoughts, Oliver opened his dark eyes, so much like Adrian's, and gazed at her with the solemn attention babies sometimes displayed. Lena traced his tiny eyebrow with her finger. "I made the right choice," she whispered to him. "Someday you'll understand." But even as she said it, a small voice in her mind wondered if protection could sometimes be another word for selfishness. Was she really protecting her children from an unwilling father, or was she protecting herself from potential rejection? The sun had set completely now, and the apartment was filled with the soft shadows that marked the beginning of another long night. Lena stood carefully, settling both babies back in their bassinet, and moved to close the blinds. Through the window she could see the city lights twinkling in the distance, including the gleaming tower where Adrian's company occupied the top 3 floors. For just a moment, she allowed herself to imagine what it would be like if things had been different. If he had wanted the same things she did. If somewhere in that tower he was thinking about her too. But fantasies were dangerous when you had real lives depending on you. Lena pulled the blinds closed and turned away from the window, away from the life that might have been, and toward the life she had chosen to build alone. Adrian couldn't taste the Wagyu beef, the wine, a 1998 Chateau Margaux worth more than most people's monthly salary, might as well have been water. Across from him, Cassandra was describing her latest photography project, her eyes animated as she gestured with her fork, but her words felt like background noise. All he could see were those 2 small bundles in Lena's arms. "You're completely somewhere else," Cassandra said, setting down her glass with a soft clink. "Should I be offended?" Adrian forced his attention back to her. Cassandra wore a black silk dress that hugged her curves perfectly, her blonde hair catching the candlelight. 3 months ago, when they'd met at a renewable energy summit in Vancouver, he had been immediately drawn to her confidence, her independence, her complete lack of neediness. She was a successful photographer with her own gallery, her own apartment, her own life that intersected with his without depending on it. Everything he thought he wanted. "I'm sorry," he said, reaching across the table to cover her hand with his. Long day. You know how it is with the Portland contract negotiations. She studied his face with the same intensity she brought to capturing the perfect shot. This isn't about work. I can tell the difference between your stressed face and your confused face. This is definitely confused. Adrian almost smiled despite himself. Cassandra's directness was one of the things he appreciated about her. No games, no fishing for information she wanted. If she had a question, she asked it. There was someone I recognized earlier, he said carefully. Someone I haven't seen in a while. An ex? Yes. Cassandra leaned back in her chair, swirling her wine thoughtfully. The ex? The one you were with for 2 years before we met? Adrian nodded. He had mentioned Lena briefly early in their relationship, the way people do when explaining their romantic history. Nothing detailed, just the basic facts. They had wanted different things. The breakup had been amicable. They hadn't spoken since. And seeing her brought up feelings? It brought up questions. Cassandra was quiet for a long moment, and Adrian could practically see her weighing her response. This was exactly the kind of emotional complexity he had been trying to avoid in his post-Lena life. Cassandra had every right to be upset, to demand explanations, to make this about their relationship. Instead, she surprised him. Do you want to talk about it? I'm not sure there's anything to talk about yet. But you think there might be? Adrian met her eyes. I don't know. Cassandra nodded slowly. Okay. Well, when you figure it out, let me know if it affects us. It was exactly the kind of mature, non-possessive response that had attracted him to her in the first place. No jealousy, no demands for immediate answers, no attempt to control his process, just acceptance that people have histories that sometimes resurface unexpectedly. So why did her understanding make him feel lonelier than if she had gotten angry? They finished dinner making small talk about her upcoming exhibition and his company's expansion into offshore wind farms. Professional topics that felt safe, familiar. When he dropped her off at her Queen Anne apartment, she kissed him lightly on the cheek. Take care of yourself, she said. Whatever this is, don't let it eat you alive. Adrian drove home to his penthouse in Belltown, but instead of going upstairs, he found himself walking the empty streets. Seattle at night had always cleared his head. The combination of salt air from the sound and the energy of a city that never quite slept. But tonight his mind refused to quiet. The timing was impossible to ignore. If Lena had been pregnant when they broke up and hadn't told him, why? If she had discovered it afterward, why hadn't she reached out? And if those babies weren't his, if the timing was just a cruel coincidence, why did the possibility feel like a physical ache in his chest? By the time he returned to his building, Adrian had made a decision he wasn't proud of. He called Marcus Webb, the private investigator his company used for due diligence on potential business partners. Marcus answered on the second ring despite the late hour. Adrian, what do you need? This is personal, not business. Even better, personal pays more. Adrian gave Marcus Lena's full name and last known address, feeling like he was crossing a line he couldn't uncross. I need to know where she's living now, what she's been doing for the past year. Specifically, I need to know about any children. Marcus was quiet for a moment. This is about an ex? Yes. And you think she might have had your kid without telling you? I think I need to know for certain that she didn't. Fair enough. Give me 24 hours. After hanging up, Adrian stood in his living room surrounded by the material evidence of his success. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Elliott Bay. His furniture was custom designed, his art collection worth more than most people's houses. Everything was exactly as he had wanted it. Clean, uncluttered, free of the domestic chaos he had once feared would suffocate him. But tonight, the space felt vast and empty. He poured himself 3 fingers of Macallan 25 and settled into the leather chair where he usually read financial reports. Instead, he found himself remembering details about Lena he had tried to forget. The way she hummed while cooking always the same song, The Way You Look Tonight, usually off-key but completely unconscious of it. How she kept a small notebook where she wrote down funny things people said, claiming she was collecting material for a novel she would never write. The careful way she arranged flowers,